How to Communicate with Confidence session. This is an event organized by the King's Alumni Relations team in collaboration with King's Careers and Employability. My name is Magdalena. I will be your chair for this evening, and thank you so much for being with us today. This event is a third how-to event in this series organized by the King's Alumni Relations team. And thanks to this series, King's remarkable alumni come back to King's to share their story and inspiration for career development with King's recent graduates and King's current students as well. But this session is a little bit more special because it is also a celebration of International Women's Day that took place just a few days ago, last Sunday, the 8th of March. So happy International Women's Day, everyone. And just a few housekeeping rules before we start. We are recording this event, not live streaming, but recording, just an FYI. And also towards the end of the session, we'll have a Q&A. So if you would like to ask a question, you can already start thinking about it. We'll have a member of our team just wandering around the room with a mic. So just please wait a few seconds until they reach you so everybody can hear your question. And the main part of our event really is the introduction of our brilliant speaker today, Emily Berrington, who graduated from King's in 2008 with a degree in development geography. Ever since leaving King's, Emily has had an amazing and varied career as an actor, as a communications coach, as a political campaigner. She has loads of critically acclaimed roles in her portfolio in theater, in TV, in film, including Humans and The In-Betweeners. Now, Emily is a communications coach and co-founder of Let Them Talk, a nonprofit that supports young people develop the art of communication in day-to-day situations. And she's also a political campaigner supporting 50-50 Parliament that advocates for gender equality in the House of Commons. And this is just a quick snapshot of all of Emily's amazing achievements. We're very excited to hear from her directly in more detail. So welcome, Emily.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
Yeah, welcome back. Thank you so much for being with us this evening.
Oh, it's amazing to be back. I've really enjoyed walking around the building again. I haven't been in the Strand campus, I think, for, I don't know, 20 years? Yeah, no, I left in 2008, so not quite 20 years yet, but yeah, close enough.
Glad to have you back.
Yeah.
We always start with a question that probably you wouldn't have been asked elsewhere, at least I would like to believe so. And if you would like to tell us a little bit about your time at King's, any fun memories, any lessons, and also kind of to go back to the start, how did you end up at King's? Why did you choose this place and your course, development geography, as well?
That's a good question. I haven't thought about that for so long. I grew up in Oxford, which apparently has its own university, but I decided to go.
Never heard about it.
Yeah, never heard of it. I knew I wanted to move to London because even though I wanted to do a degree that was about thinking about the world at large and the systems in place, and so development geography is what I chose to study, I knew I wanted to study in a city where my world would expand. So Oxford's wonderful, but it's quite a small place, and I wanted to move somewhere where I knew I could go to the theatre and meet people from all over the world and just see my horizons expanding through the place that I was living in, as well as the course I was doing. And so I applied to King's, and my sort of most formative experiences at King's, alongside what I learned in my degree, was I joined the Musical Theatre Society. And I didn't even really mean to, just a friend of mine in my halls of residence had already joined and said, "Oh, come along," and I did, and it was really fun. And there was something about being with this group of people and having resources, like we were, performing at the Greenwood Theatre, having rehearsal spaces, having some funding to put on shows together, entirely done by students, I just found that completely amazing, that you could do it, that you could put on a show without grown-ups, like we were the grown-ups for the first time in my life. And feeling the responsibility of that and putting something on together. So the Musical Theatre Society was very much my sort of there, you know, many of those people are the friends that I'm still friends with now, as well as the ones from my course. So there was that. There was also the experience of living in London. I truly think we made the best of it in my student days. Every student discount I would sign up for, I'd go and get £10 tickets for every West End show, wander into every museum and spend 5 minutes there and leave again. And yeah, so I think the location was a bigger part of my time here as everything else.
What is the biggest learning, do you think, that you had from your time at King's?
Well, I remember it really astonished me when I realized that learning at university was two-way, that the state education system, and I had brilliant teachers at the state school I went to, but there wasn't the time or the really ability to do anything other than get you through the curriculum and make sure you inhaled the knowledge you needed for your exams and could write it all down in the exams and memorize it and then get your A levels and go. And so coming to, you know, my first seminar and realizing that I was expected to maybe have an opinion or maybe have some thoughts about something I'd read, it took me a while to even really comprehend that this was a two-way learning experience, that what I thought was as valuable as what somebody could teach me. And I think I only really got to grips with that towards the second year. So that was my biggest learning experience and something I've tried to take forward and is very much related to the non-profit that I'm setting up about how we can help teenagers from an earlier point, or people that aren't going on to higher education, how you can have that kind of two-way learning opportunity earlier, that your own voice in your education is as important as what you're required to, you know, memorize for the exam system we currently have.
Yeah, we would love to talk about the non-profits in a little more detail in a second. But before we do so, I guess students a lot of the time have, or recent graduates in the room as well, some anxiety. Okay, what now? What do I do now when university is over? So could you tell us a little bit more, how was it in your case? Like, what was life after King's, basically? What did you get up to next, and what inspired you to go down the route that you did?
Well, I recently did one of the speeches at a King's graduation ceremony last month, and I spoke exclusively about not knowing what's going to come next and how frightening that can be, but also what an enormous opportunity it is. So I am an actor, a communications coach, a director of a non-profit. I've got 3 small children. Not a single one of those job titles or roles in my life was in my brain when I was at King's, or even just after I left. And I suppose I think I imagined I might want to work for an NGO or go into the civil service or something, all of which would have been fantastic career paths. But that is not where I ended up. When I first left King's, the first thing I needed to do was just be able to afford to stay in London, because I wanted to stay where all my friends were. So I just got a job in a pub. It was like the first thing that I did. And it wasn't part of the plan, but I knew I wanted to stay in London. I then did about 1 million job applications and ended up working for an MP, which was brilliant. And the work the work I'd done in my degree was incredibly helpful for arriving in that kind of environment with some knowledge about how systems work and how governmental systems work. But then when I was working for an MP, I was also still thinking about how much I loved performing in theatre, and decided to apply to drama school. And again, because a few of my friends had applied to drama school, and I just sort of thought, oh, that's something people are doing, and to become an actor, I'll try that. And I went to drama school and became an actor. And so at every stage, I think the fact that I wasn't 100% sure about what I wanted to be or do meant that I always had the door slightly open to opportunities or ideas, or basically just copying other people. I thought what they're doing looks good. That's what I would do next. And it's meant that I've become somebody who is quite flexible and adaptable, which is very useful in life. And I know many people that I went to university with had very clear career paths and have followed through on them and are very happy and filled by that. But for me, I really wish I could go and tell my recently graduated self that not knowing, not being really sure what the career path would be is the thing that has been fulfilling for me, because I was open to these opportunities that ended up being really good for me.
I think that's very reassuring. We touched a little bit upon communication already, because now you work as a communications coach and we would like to talk to students how to communicate with confidence. So you worked for an MP, then you applied for drama school. So how do you think acting and coaching careers, and that early career in politics as well, how did they inform your understanding of the importance of communication, and how has it changed through these experiences and through the years that you develop your career?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that thing I said about two-way learning and having agency in my education, that was the beginning of then my life's work around communication, because I guess I realized that I was arriving into the adult world without feeling I had the agency to express really what was in my brain, that I was very consumed with the right answer, which I think a lot of people who've been through a similar kind of early education would identify with, that, you know, the exam system is about the right answer or the wrong answer, even in creative subjects. And so university gave me the beginnings of thinking, okay, there's more than just the right answer. And actually, that's not how the wider world works, that, you know, you're not sitting an exam for most of the days of your life. Working in Parliament, I really saw what communication did for people. You know, that's where influence lies in many cases, that people who can express themselves in a way that somehow connects with an audience are often the ones that gain influence. I say this as if I've worked out something incredible. I know that's a statement of the absolute obvious, but it felt, I just remember in a very sort of embryonic way thinking, because there were MPs that I worked with who were backbenchers, who I would think, they're amazing. They have incredible values and they've come into this career for the absolute right reasons, but they aren't necessarily shouting the loudest. And so who is shouting the loudest, and why is that voice getting heard, and why are those kind of voices always on the front bench, and so on? And obviously many of those people, you could say the same of them in terms of values, but I just began to notice that a little bit. And then when I went to drama school, it revealed to me that communication skills of self-expression are completely learnable for anyone and everyone, as long as they're done by people that are seeing communication from an inclusive perspective. So rather than us all aiming to have the kind of voice or the kind of communication skills that we traditionally see, you know, if you think of like traditional good orators who have a particular kind of voice, a particular kind of stature, maybe more likely to be a man, maybe more likely to be white, maybe more likely to have an RP accent. You know, what are the things that we can bring in to self-expression that don't require people to conform to any of that? And then also I began thinking, well, what do we ask of the environments that we work in? How can we listen in a different way to make sure that voices that don't conform to that are properly heard and listened to? So through being an actor, you know, I did a huge amount on how you use your voice, how you connect to an audience, how you get an idea across in a kind of energized, engaging way, how you also bring some of yourself to a role that you're playing. And then through my years of starting to do coaching alongside acting and working with big teams, I thought, well, you know, there's a huge amount of crossover that you can bring that doesn't require, you know, I wouldn't go into a corporate setting and bring out the kind of wackiest drama school I don't know, let's be in leotards exercise, but but
Why
there's
not,
lots-
you know?
Yeah, I mean, they'd be welcome to, but that there are lots of ways that a kind of creative approach to how do you express what's in here and what's in here and get it out, that I think lots of people respond to. Sorry, I've completely forgotten what the original question was.
Yeah, I mean,
I've got
you're
that,
on
yeah.
on the right track. I was just asking you about like how your experiences for
Yeah,
life
good. I
informed
think
your
good.
understanding of communication. So yeah, thank
Good.
you so much. And you touched upon something that I wanted to talk a little bit more. So saying that traditionally we're taught that maybe people from like certain demographics only are the best communicators, the best orators, and so on. And you mentioned, on the other hand, that confident communication isn't just about being comfortable with public speaking per se, but more about how we listen to others, how we challenge as well, and how we are authentic. So can you tell us a little bit more about what good communication means to you and maybe share some tips
Sure.
just among us friends?
Yes, absolutely. Well, it's a bit of a contradiction in terms that I think that really good communication it depends on the individual. So when I work with individuals, I look very much about that person, what environment they're in, what they want to bring to that, what they already have, and not trying to change them into somebody else. But in terms of things that are foundational and more general, I think that we have a big challenge that is maybe specific to this day and age, or maybe it's always existed, about trying to be perfect and trying to express ourselves perfectly without mistakes, without fumbles, without feeling nervous, delivering a message with like absolute clarity without having to clarify something afterwards. And letting go of that is my number one approach. And I even have to do it to myself. I'm here to talk about communication. I trip over words. I say something and then I think, that's not exactly how I meant it. And so giving myself constant permission that if it goes wrong, that's fine. It can never go that wrong if you're talking to another human being, even in a very high pressure situation, like a job interview for something you really want. If you say something and straight afterwards you think, that is not how I meant that to come out, give yourself full permission to say that. That's not what I meant, actually. Can I just try and reframe that? Or do you mind if I just take a moment to think about that for a second? Or even saying out loud, I'm a bit nervous, and so I'm not quite finding the thought as quick as I want to. I'm just going to take a moment to think it through. So that's my number one thing to myself that I also encourage other people to do. And I'd say it's worth having some key phrases that work for you that you can use in those environments, those kind of high pressure environments where you want to confidently give yourself permission to just reset a little bit. And then I'd say that, so I put my clipboard down so I can show you something, that the number one thing that most clients I work with struggle with in communication is what happens when you feel nervous, when your nervous system is kind of agitated, which can just be because there's some pressure, because you're speaking in front of people, because you're talking to somebody where there's a power dynamic where you're kind of lower down, like an interview, like talking to a boss, or where you're doing some public speaking. And so the number one thing to do is to find a way of grounding yourself back in who you are as a person, that situation you're in does not define your entire life, even if it's a massive opportunity. You know, I've walked into audition rooms where I think, if I nail this, this could change my entire life. I mean, the pressure that exists for me in that moment is so enormous. So all I can do is think, well, who am I beyond this moment? So I start with a physical grounding exercise, for which I encourage people to get both of their feet flat on the floor. So if you're sitting down, you know, if you're in an interview or something and you've got your legs crossed, try and get both feet flat on the floor. If you're standing up, both feet grounded on the floor. And I just think to myself, the ground is supporting me. That's all. And as soon as you've done that, you know, so it's a basic sort of mindfulness technique. It takes a little bit of your attention away from nerves and whatever's going on, and it also connects you with the physical feeling. So my feet are, I'm supported by the floor, or I'm grounded to the floor, whatever helps you. I then try and think, I have time to breathe. I'm even doing it now. I'm slightly rushing because I'm talking to lots of people. So I start breathing like that. And then I talk a bit quicker because I've got so many things I want to say and I don't want to forget any of them. And lots of people do that when they're nervous, particularly women. But I have time to breathe. There's no rush. If you're in an interview or if you're talking to somebody that, you know, you really want to get an idea across to, trust that there is time for you to breathe. And it's actually not that long. The other person won't be like, what's happened to them? Why are they silent for 0.5 of a second? And if you need even longer than that, give it to yourself. If someone asks me a question, you'll see it later in the Q&A. Even if I know the answer, I try to give myself a moment and go, that's a really good question. Even if I know the answer already, because it just gives my whole body a moment to go, there's no rush. I can breathe and I can think before the words start just pouring out of my mouth. So ground to the floor, time to breathe. And then the final one is having an intention about why you are bothering to speak. That is a classic, you know, it's an actor technique of why is that character bothering to speak in that moment? Why are the lines not just empty words that you're blurting out? But it applies to every day. Most of us aren't, like you said, most of us aren't doing public speaking every day of our lives. Those day-to-day communications are the ones that most of us want to kind of explore more or I don't know, put more of ourselves into. So I constantly think to myself, why am I having this conversation and what is it about? Not in a like, what do I want to get from it way, but just what's this about? So right now I'm thinking, I want to guide this group of people through a series of ideas that I have. I want to explain some details from experiences I've got. And I want this group of people to understand some of that. So that immediately gives a sense of how, I don't even have to then try. It makes me slow down. It makes me think, have I actually got through? It makes me look at people's faces and go, do they look like they've understood what I've said? It works really well one-to-one. If I'm sitting with a client and thinking, I really want them to understand this concept, like that's my intention here, is to help them understand. So having a clear intention, crucially, your intention can't be something that you have no control over, like I want them to think I'm amazing, because you have no control over what they think of you. But something that's to do with what you're doing to them. Like I want to guide them, I want to educate them, I want to inspire. I guess inspire them is slightly out of your control, but I want to kind of energize the room, something like that. So just having a clear intention, and it can be much simpler than that. Those kind of words don't work for everybody, those sort of buzzy, actory type of words. Even something like, I want to try and connect with this person. You know, in an interview, in an audition, I often go in thinking, forget about impressing them. Can I connect with the person auditioning me on some level? It makes me look in their eyes a bit more, probably makes me arrive with a bit more of warm energy. So yeah, so those are my things: grounding, clarity of intention, time to breathe. There's a million more, but those are my top three.
Thank you. We'll try taking it out to the word now.
I can cross my legs again.
But I also wanted to ask about, because now we have the tools, you have given us some tools, but for your work with young people who struggle with communication, face up to different challenges in this area, have you observed any like common challenges that they face, something that like they struggle with a lot when communicating, and how can we tackle that?
Yeah, so when I work with younger people, particularly with let them talk, what we're aiming to do is work with teenagers, but also students. And so then it's, you know, I'm not looking at communication coaching there. It's much more exploratory, partly because I'm aware that no matter how young, forever young, I think I am, you know, the experiences that a 16-year-old or a 20-year-old is having now is very different to the one I had. And so we're trying to learn as much as we can from the people that are in that situation right now of what are the challenges. In terms of what I've observed with that awareness of not being them, I think the pressure to express oneself perfectly is a huge pressure. Lots of young people I've spoken to talk about that in terms of, thinking about social media and how things are sort of written down and black and white and open to misinterpretation. The culture that we're in around talking about very difficult, like hot topics, and fear of saying something wrong or fear of alienating somebody. So we talk a lot about how do you recover when a conversation has gone really wrong, and how do you deal with that from both sides? If you're the person who feels very wronged or has done the wrong, what do you do? How do you survive that moment? It's also we do a lot of work from a creative perspective of how you express who you are. What's your kind of narrative that you want to build about how do you go out into the world and talk to other people about what you care about and where you come from and what you want to do. How do you express that in a way that is creative and interesting and that you feel interested in doing? And also, how is it flexible so that, next year you might feel really differently about loads of things? And how can you always stay open to discovering the next way that you want to sort of operate in the world? Does that answer that question?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. And I guess as a follow-up, since we're hosting this event as part of International Women's Day celebrations, do you think there are specific challenges specifically for women in terms of communication and confidence that you have observed for your work as well?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think there's the really obvious one, which is representation in parliament, in leadership roles, that the more we are able to see women expressing themselves in a range of different ways and thinking intersectionally in a range of different voices, in a range of different bodies, that until we are seeing that all the time, that there will always be far more work to do for women in communication and how that works with equality. So I'm a big supporter of the 50-50 Parliament campaign, who are an apolitical charity, and they work with women and men to create a network of people who are interested in gender equality in parliaments, and that goes from MPs to councils, including candidates. Not just who is actually in the House of Parliament, but who's even standing. And so I really encourage anybody who's here or who watches this, if you are interested in standing to be elected as a member of your council or as an MP, they are the place to start. Or if you know someone that you think would be brilliant, and their whole message is that you don't need to know anything. You do not need to be an expert. You just need to be somebody who cares about representing your community, and they can help you do all the next bits and find out what you need. And they have all these wonderful sort of support pathways to help women from all different places that are arriving there, to make sure that at the next election, so I think at the moment there's 41% women MPs, but the predictions for the next election is that could slide back down to 26%. And so to ensure that doesn't happen, we need to pull out all the stops and make sure there are a lot of very brilliant women candidates at the next election. And in terms of communication, so yeah, it's about seeing people in leadership roles or in all sorts of roles, who you could aspire to be. And that I certainly grew up thinking of, if somebody said the word politician, I would essentially think of Hugh Grant in Love Actually, and like that was all I could think of. And it's only as you see people and also hear different accents and hear women who don't have voices that are associated with I don't know, traditional sort of male leadership, that you can speak softly, or you can speak in a gentle voice and still deserve to be listened to and still have influence. So in terms of my work with women, and I do work with quite a lot of female clients, we talk a lot about you know, it'd be wonderful if the workplace was the thing that changed. If workplaces were having in-depth training all the time about how people express themselves in the workplace and how we make sure we're listening to them without bias and tuning into our own bias all the time, but not just to do with gender, to do with race, disability, everything. It would be wonderful if workplaces were all doing that. But we also can't wait for a perfect system to do whatever we can do individually. So I'm very interested in exploring, because I absolutely do not have the answer, how an individual can go into a workplace that still is very much defined by the patriarchy, be authentically themselves, use a voice that they feel authentically comfortable with, whilst also giving themselves the best possible opportunity in that workplace. And like I say, I don't know the answer. I've been working with a trainee barrister recently who's a young woman, and we've talked a lot about how she does not need to conform to the traditional barrister tropes, but equally, we don't want to deny her the opportunities that might go along with expressing herself in a way that's extremely helpful in certain environments. And so how we kind of try and bring those things together, but also how you can be an advocate in your workplace for people that speak in different ways, and make sure that, you know, all of us are going into places and listening with our most kind of non-biased ears wherever we can go.
Yeah, it's hard to have an answer, but I'm sure since you are a woman of many jobs and many talents, many careers, maybe you could share with us some reflections or examples, like what it means to be a woman in the workplace, how it changed throughout your careers, the years as well, and also what would be the example of being able to champion women's voices in the workplace and beyond as well.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest, it's, you know, I'm very aware that I entered the workplace from King's with a huge number of privileges that I, you know, I do have the accent that was most at the time particularly associated with people listening to you. I have a naturally quite loud voice, you know, all the privileges that I took with me. And it was having children, for me, was the thing that revealed the biggest challenges in my career to being a woman and working. That so I can only speak for myself is what I'm trying to say, that by no means do I think this represents all experience. That as soon as I had children, I could feel professional opportunities changing in relation to me. I was advised to, in my acting career, by some other people in the industry, you might not want to mention that you have children when you go to auditions because people will see you differently. And unfortunately, I'm very boring and can basically only talk about my children, so I couldn't do that. And so, yeah, I did notice that my work opportunities shifted, and by that I mean diminished. And the type of opportunities that came my way were a bit different. And then there's the logistical thing, which is that childcare is extortionate. And so to be able to afford to work, you need to earn more than your childcare costs after tax. And that is my sort of lifelong challenge at the moment between me and my partner, that it's an enormous barrier, and one that I have no idea how that's going to get sorted out. So that's kind of one area that I've really noticed. But also that has a knock-on effect. That I remember when I was working in Parliament, there were lots of women of my age, sort of early to mid-20s. And then I noticed lots of women in their sort of late 40s, 50s onwards. And I thought, where are all those ones in the middle? And it's that they were having children and it was very hard for them to work the hours required and so on. But then that also meant there wasn't a peer group just above me to aspire to about what do I do next. So wherever women become invisible in any workplace, it hasn't, you know, it doesn't just impact those women who have disappeared, it impacts the other women around them and you know, anybody around them of any gender who would benefit from them being there. So I also have tried to do some of my coaching work, particularly focused at mothers re-entering the workplace, about how do you advocate for yourself when you have had time out of work, you are coming back into the work environment, all the feelings that come with that, how your work responds to you, and how you can advocate for what you need that will enable you to stay in that career, because the dropout rate is so enormous when people return to work and their workplaces don't support them. You know, it's one thing your job being there, but whether it can really cope with your new role in life as a mother is another thing. So being able to advocate for what you need is a huge part of what I do.
Thank you. That's really amazing to hear on Women's Day in particular. And yeah, we are really inspired by everything that you have achieved so far, but also interested what's next for you. Are there any particular roles maybe or challenges that you would like to pursue in the future? Maybe something at King's? And yeah, how are you going to approach these new challenges?
Well, that is a really good question. And that is, in some ways, at the moment, I'm experimenting with not having too clear a plan, because of what I was saying earlier, that I really, I feel like I'm trying to see what emerges, see what I respond to, see what comes up and follow things. Having said that, there are some clear things that are in my plan. And one of them is I'm collaborating with King's Edge. So through King's Alumni department, I've connected with King's Edge, and I am launching with Let Them Talk, which is the non-profit that I've co-founded. We're launching a program at King's, working with current students, also partnering with the research team. And that will be exploring how creativity and communication skills overlap, and doing that sort of in live time in workshops, and then also looking at some research around what we can learn and understand and take forward from that.
That's incredible. That reminds me that this event is organized by King's Edge as well. So if you haven't scanned the QR code to register for the event, please make sure to do so. But I hope you have already if you are a student. And yeah, thank you so much, Emily. We are going to move on to a Q&A, but before we do that, let's just join me in a round of applause for Emily. Thank you. Thank you. And yeah, now the floor is yours. If you have a question, please feel free to raise your hand. We have another Emily from our team there, and she'll be walking around with a mic. So yeah, do we have any questions in the room? Anybody? Yes, here at the front.
Hiya. Thanks for a great talk. I'm not a student, but an alumni. And so my question is to do with typically what you said, you know, to be sort of heard and to remove biases and to try and communicate effectively. So the things such as, you know, there's a stereotypical image, white, a certain accent, so on and so forth. I am a graduate in pharmacy, and I am a woman with an immigrant background, and I'm in healthcare, so a healthcare startup. And I often find that asking myself the question, how do I lead with quiet energy and yet be assertive? You know, I'm not one of those, or you're right. The typical person is the one, he who shouts loudest gets heard the most. So my question to you would be, how do you lead with quiet energy and yet be assertive? Not firm, but still get the job done.
Yeah, that is such a good question. I said I was going to say that, and I did. I think quiet energy is actually some of the most powerful energy that I observe. And that might be because of the kind of listener I am. But I actually think that if your natural energy and your natural communication is quiet, that is something to be fully, you know, I would lean into that and be as quiet as you dare. And if people are not listening, or you feel they're not responding, that probably the most effective thing is to quietly reflect that to them. And, you know, if it's possible, bring it up with humanity, with heart, and say, you know, I notice that maybe sometimes you're not fully hearing me, or I notice I'm interrupted a lot, or, you know, just being able to gently reflect something back and say, do you think that's related to the fact that I speak quietly? I think if somebody, most people, if they had that reflected to them, it would immediately switch something on in their mind of, oh yes, I might be doing that. You know, most people would immediately want to rectify that. If they don't, then, you know, that's a much harder issue, and there might have to be other people involved in what's required next. But I think, yeah, that if it can be done with, from a place of humanity, because some people really don't notice that, you know, and I've definitely been in places in my life where I haven't noticed that I'm not listening to someone just because they're quieter. And just somebody saying it with a sort of desire to not tell me off, but just, I've just noticed this is happening. What do you think? That could go a long way. I don't know. It may be helpful, may not, but let me know if it does.
So as a follow-up to that story, would you say that like when working in communications and coaching as well, do you have an impression that maybe sometimes the quiet energy, as we have said, is confused with lack of confidence? And is there any way to challenge that?
I think it probably can be. Although ironically, I often think that loud energy is probably related to lack of confidence, but it's just about how traditionally that's perceived. But when I meet someone with quiet energy, it immediately makes me kind of lean towards them. And I think, wow, they know that they don't have to be loud to make somebody listen. But as I say, that may be the listener I am. And I think that, you know, we do live in a society where, you know, you only have to look at sort of the leaders of the world and see that those who shout the loudest often have the most influence. But by naming that as often as possible and just saying, you know, it doesn't mean that you're not capable. It just means, can I just make sure that we are creating space for everybody's voice in the room? Also being an advocate for that if you're in a room and you notice somebody gets interrupted a lot, just pointing out to people, oh, I've just noticed that we keep interrupting. You can say we, even if it's not you, interrupting so-and-so, that can be a wonderful way of, you know, you have to be careful that you're not embarrassing the person in question. But I remember actually when I was at King's, a linguistics student said to me, I notice you get interrupted a lot. And she said, I listen to how people talk. And I felt like, oh no, that's awful. But it did, it lit a little fire in me of, oh yeah, I do. And I don't like that. And so occasionally I started saying to people, oh, you interrupted me then. Do you mind if I just finish? That sometimes people don't even realize it's happening.
Was it something that you were aware of before, or
No.
only once this person brought that up?
Only once the person brought it
Interesting.
up. And it did feel confronting, you know, it took probably a bit of courage for her to say it, but I knew she was saying it as an offering to me of, you don't have to accept that I think I would get interrupted and then stop. And that just having the awareness was enough to make me occasionally go, oh yeah, I did get interrupted. And then obviously the more I stopped people interrupting me, the less they interrupted me.
Thank you. Do we have more questions? I can see there's a question here. The fourth row. Thank you, Emily.
Thanks, Emily, and Emily for the walk. Yeah, thank you so much for the talk. It was really good. My question is, you mentioned the influence of intersectionality on communication, and a lot of people in their early 20s, like myself, we lost a lot of opportunity to actually hone our communication skills during our coming of age years because of COVID-19. And I find that really impacts the way I communicate in the workplace now that I'm here as a recent graduate. But how do you think we can navigate that, especially women, because there's a lot of confidence stats as a result, which reflects in our communication? Thank you.
That's something that with Let Them Talk, we've been discussing a lot about the fact that there is a group of people emerging into university life and into the workplace who had an incredibly different educational experience or different formative years where you learn how to communicate with your peers because of COVID, but also even just, you know, smartphones and social media and how people are communicating in their teenage years now. and the reduction in sort of face-to-face communication being the only way that you would ever interact with people. And so it's something that I'm still working to understand, and we're doing a lot of research and partnering with individuals who have a lot more expertise than we do, and also with young people who have actually experienced it, where they can talk to us about what they think the impacts are. And actually, I'd love to, if it's possible afterwards, hear, you know, more of what you think about it. But I think our approach is one that by doing something, it inevitably gets easier. Like with any skill, if you give people opportunities to communicate face to face in low pressure situations about a range of different things, that it's, you know, much like exercise or anything, the more you do it, the more you work those muscles of saying something about yourself, of making eye contact with people, of asking questions of people, the more natural it becomes. And then you have the opportunity to find out the way to do it that works for you. So the long-term idea with Let Them Talk would be that we roll it out in lots of schools, that they have programs that are specifically designed to reignite some of those skills that are being slightly lost in young people, of how do you walk into a room where you don't know anybody and find a way of engaging in a conversation, or how do you talk to somebody that you're intimidated by without feeling like you're squashed by that feeling. Yeah. Does that answer your question? Good.
I think there was a question in a row behind. Yes, thank you.
Thanks, Emily, for a great talk. My name is Katrina. I'm an alumni. My question relates to the first question. I often find that in the meetings that I'm in, the men just can't hear me. And so they'll just keep talking. They talk over the top of, and they can't hear me. So my question is, do you have any techniques for like learning to project your voice when you need to? So lifting it when you need to. And also, I guess, altering pitch or lowering your voice when you need to, because I think men respond to a lower voice, sadly.
I think that's such a good question. And those two questions really capture the thing I was saying about this barrister I've been working with, of how you ask for change from your environment whilst also working out what skills or techniques are going to help you in the environment as it currently is. So I always sort of like to flag that of course it would be better if you didn't have to make any of those changes, but you've noticed that would be helpful. And so I think that the thing I said about intention is one of the most effective ways of getting somebody's attention, or if people are talking over you, being really laser focused on who it is you want to hear you and what it is you want to say, that instantly shifts something in one's energy. You know, I found myself in situations where, even in social situations, where I'm sort of trying to express something and I could, you know, not managing to get in. And if I take a moment and think, I really want to tell this story, and I really want that you know, I'll choose one person and think, I'm going to get that person to listen to me. That quite often they then do, and then other people follow. It doesn't always work. In terms of vocal technique, I think that there's a lot to be said for creating space inside your mouth. Sorry, just hit the mic. Inside your mouth and with your body. So if I work with people that feel that they, you know, don't have a voice that kind of travels very far, I always talk about something that was very useful for me at drama school and with speech therapists that I've had, is thinking about how much space can I create with my mouth when I talk. That lots of us, it's, you know, associated with lots of different things, with accent, with gender and so on, that we keep our mouths quite closed when we talk. And that immediately makes our voice a little bit more sort of captured within, or sends it backwards. As soon as you think, can I just open my mouth a bit more when I speak? So I'm doing it now. You probably notice it, but I don't think I look completely insane. Like, I think I could get away with it. So I think I'll open my mouth a bit more. If you have a very tense jaw, you can always give your jaw a little massage before a meeting with people that are not good at listening. I just think I'm just going to create some space in my mouth. And I also try and create a bit of space just with my body. So I try not to sit in a narrow way. I try and just like take up the actual space of my actual body, which again is something that is sort of a socially inflicted thing on women of being narrow, that the clothes that we've traditionally worn or so on can create a narrowness and a closing down. Not very good for breath control and not very good for projection. So thinking about space. And finally, thinking about a voice that is going forward and out. So there's loads of stuff out there by people that know far more than me about the kind of the biological side of vocal training and how you're using the shape of your mouth and your tongue and what your larynx is doing and what your breath support is doing. But definitely one thing I noticed is, and you can hear it actually in different accents, that some accents come very far forward. The American accent comes forward in a really sort of effective way. My accent sort of goes backwards somehow. So I'm always thinking, how can I have this like forward feeling of the words zinging out of my mouth across the room? And actually having a microphone makes me kind of sit back down on it. But if I didn't have the microphone, I'd be thinking about that back wall. And I'd be thinking, how can I see the words traveling to the back wall like that? Does that answer at all? Good.
We have a lot of questions now.
I'll try and answer a bit more succinctly.
No, that's great. We still have time. So yeah, let's just try from there maybe. Thank you. And then you guys can just like pass it along to one another.
Thank you both for that wonderful conversation. My name's Jade, I'm a current student, and I really appreciated the advice on speaking with intention, particularly in interviews. Whereas nowadays, depending on the sector, you could have an interview with a screen or a pre-recorded one, it could be AI. So I'm wondering, if you don't have that connection, how is it best to get across that intention? Is it expression or body language? Thank you.
So do you mean if you're speaking, if you're doing an interview, but on screen, so on Zoom or Teams or something?
Yeah, or even sometimes there's not even a person on the other end. It's recorded to be watched back later or through a program.
Sure. So I've worked quite a lot in the past with teams. During the pandemic, there was lots of work around this being done of how you communicate as effectively through screen as you do in person. Which luckily crosses over so well with what actors have to do, that when you're working on film or TV, thinking about how you connect with something that's through the camera and out in a living room that you'll never see. I think that the first thing is really basic, which is the setup of just making sure that the camera is at the level of your eyes. So none of the kind of looking down into a screen stuff that immediately, not only does it just sort of show all of you more, again, it will allow you to fully let your voice come out, that you're not kind of crunching down. So having the screen opposite you, right in front of your eyes, so piling it up on some books or whatever. I think that through Zoom, through Teams, through a screen or something pre-recorded, I think you need to give more energy than feels natural. So, and then maybe even a bit more than that again. If you can bear it, just filming yourself, introducing yourself and watching it back and going, I thought I was giving loads of energy and something really expressive. And actually, once it's recorded, it sounds like this. And so you can actually go a bit further. So if you can bear doing it, try that. That leads back into using your mouth more than you naturally would, using your face maybe more than you naturally would. And then I try to imagine, I always advise you, try to imagine when you're looking at whatever you're looking at, whether it's the camera on your laptop, imagine there is one person through there who you know really well and who you would be really happy to be talking to. It's something that newsreaders apparently do, where they imagine they are, telling the news to one person that they know really well and making sure that that person hears this. It will just give a sort of a focus of your energy, but also probably a little bit more warmth and relaxation just from imagining them. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, there was a question in the one row down there. Oh, just pass it along later. Thank you.
Hi, I can only add my thanks to the growing list. My question was, you've talked before, Emily, about things like grounding and knowing the intention that you have in mind when you speak. However, I find, and this may apply to other people as well, so I'm just asking you, that my voice tends to shake when I speak publicly in a way that I can't control. And since you've already been sharing some of the vocal techniques, whether you have some tips, some advice for that? Thank you.
Of course, that's a really incredibly common thing. It happens to my voice as well, even though this is my profession. And like I said before, there are people out there with amazing amounts of very detailed technical vocal expertise that comes from a scientific background that it may be looking into. Someone like Patsy Rodenberg is a really good example, that her online talks, her books have a lot of really great stuff, and I think particularly for women, but for anybody, about how to engage with your voice and your breath support from a very technical point. But from what I do, I'd say that if your voice is shaking, it is, you know, it is a physical response to what's going on in your nervous system. So whatever you can do to deal with your nervous system will end up having an impact on your voice. Doing a bit more breath work than just, you know, the basic minimum, taking deep, slow breaths that are coming from a low place, noticing if you're kind of gasping for breath like that. If your voice is still shaking in an environment where you really wish it wasn't, also giving yourself permission that that is not uncommon, that it sounds a lot worse for you than to anybody else. And actually, when it's happened to me before and I've had to carry on with whatever I'm doing, sometimes I will say, I'm aware my voice is a bit shaky. You know, this often happens when I speak publicly. Don't worry, I'm fine. But just sort of putting it out there. I know that wouldn't always be appropriate. So it's only, you know, in situations where it might work for you. But I would say that breath work would be the number one thing to go to from a practical perspective of making sure if your voice is coming from a really supported place, that will diminish the shaking. And also noticing if there's any tension going on around your jaw and your neck, which again is really common, that if you're kind of trapping your voice in a little bit, that it has less chance of coming out in a clear, sort of strong way. But it is really normal. And, you know, I hear it all the time in people that are still fantastic speakers.
Thank you.
Good.
Yeah, more questions? Thank you.
Hi, yeah, thank you for all the insights. So I was wondering, so English is not my first language, and you mentioned it of the program when you tell young kids, what do you do when things go wrong? So sometimes it happens to me that I say things which slightly come out in a different way or with a different nuance. So I was wondering if you could like say a bit more about what do you do when things come out in a different way as if you would want to.
That's a great question. So there's a phrase that's actually from a parenting book I read, but it's called "Name it to tame it," and it's about if you just say it immediately, it somehow tames or sort of relaxes the whole thing. So if something comes out and you sense that has been received in a certain way, whether because of a language barrier or anything, you know, there's a million ways that we say something and we realize it's been received not as we intended it. Just naming it as soon as possible and, you know, checking in. So having some stock phrases ready, like, am I right in thinking that I offended you there? Or I'm worried that came across in a particular way. Can I check if it did? So just sort of immediately getting it out there, offering the person the opportunity to say, because you may be completely wrong. They may have not felt anything about it. Or they may not want to talk about the fact that they did, and then you can move on. And being brave. So it takes some courage because it means going head on. So being brave, having some courage with it. That's what the work I've done with young people, with drama school students. It's about like, get in there as soon as you can. Or if it's days later, it's never too late to say to somebody, do you know what, I'm still thinking about the other day when I said that thing and I wondered how it might have been heard or interpreted. Can I check with you? So it's basically never too late. You can do it years later if you want. And then breathing while listening to whatever it is that they have to say, of feeling misunderstood and misinterpreted is really not a nice feeling. But the whole point of asking is then listening. And so that, doing some breathing while you really listen, and then working out what's required. It might just be saying, I'm so sorry, I didn't mean it like that. I meant it like this, but I'm so sorry I had that impact. And again, being sort of meeting that person with total humanity, I'm sure there are people out there that would not be able to engage in that with you, but a lot of people would, and would be so impressed and relieved that you were the one that went in there and said, I think there's been a problem here that maybe, and then you can say, my English is my second language, sometimes this happens, that if they are someone that can't offer any sort of humanity over that with you, then there's not much more you can do, but it's great still that you flagged it.
Thank you. Any more questions? Oh. We'll get back to you. We'll try to at least. Time
Hello?
permitted.
That'd be great.
Hello, I'm a bit introvert and I feel a drain of my energy when I communicate with people. And as a reason, because of that, I don't practice communicating. So I wanted some tips from.
Yeah. I think that sometimes people feel like it's a bad thing to be an introvert, and it's absolutely not. It's whoever you are and whatever energy you have, and it's just about what's working for you or not. Some people I've worked with, I say that the best way to practice is find the lowest stakes situation that you can. So whether it is that's ordering a coffee or paying for your shopping. So I say, like, don't go to the self-checkout, go to the counter, go to the till, and just try to look that person in the eye and say thank you, or say good morning, how's your day going? Something where even if it comes out completely wrong and you think, oh God, that was so embarrassing, it's over, it's done, you're leaving with your coffee, it doesn't matter. So wherever you can get those really low stakes chances to practice, do it. And actually I say that even when you're moving beyond, confidence, if there's something you want to try out to do with intention or breathe, I think go and order a coffee with a particular intention in mind. The person serving you might be like, wow, that person's really intense, but it might be better than giving a coffee to somebody that's barely looked up at them. You see what I mean? So I always say all of those little day-to-day interactions are the places to practice, and then you can build up to things that have a slightly higher stakes, like socially or in lectures or whatever it is. Yeah.
I promised the students down there, so if we could pass the mic down there, and then we'll go back.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask, what do you do when the room doesn't give you the energy you need? Because I feel like I feed from other people's energy. So if it's a really good room, or if it's people that I'm really used to, I could speak really confidently. But if it's like a room that doesn't give me the reception I want, or it's very cold or very blank, and with my job, people don't have to give me that reception. They can be very and I'm just going to have to speak to them.
Yeah, that is hard, and especially for people communicating on Zoom, like we talked about, lots of people have that same problem of the faces you see are often giving very little, but that can happen in real life as well. It is really hard when you can feel a room isn't with you, or you just don't really know. And I think that's often the case, is you just don't really know whether a room is with you. As an actor, I've often, a lot of our teachers at drama school talk about the fact you don't really know if the audience is enjoying it. You might hear laughing, or you might hear people coughing and shuffling around. You don't really know what's going on in that person's mind. So to some degree, I say it's none of my business how they're receiving it. Obviously, I'm trying my best to make sure it's received well, but I can't actually make it connect with anybody. Some of that is out of my hands. I can only offer what I'm offering to the best of my abilities with my clear intention. So I try and have that one little layer of distance that I can't save the day every time and make the room respond well. However, absolutely, if you're someone that is attuned to a room's energy, it is a horrible feeling. So probably if I really think I cannot turn this around, and I've tried all my things and I just got to kind of get through, I I sometimes do an exercise that's just to do with connecting with your values beyond your work, beyond this precise moment. So when I've given, done a training session or something that's not going well, or done an audition, it's not going well, I quite often think, I'm a really good best friend to my best friend. I'm really good at listening to her. And I'm a really nice neighbor. I always check on my neighbor. I try and just have sometimes you can't do it in the moment. So you can even do it beforehand. I would just be like, what am I beyond this one moment? This one quite difficult thing I have to get through. I am so much more than that moment. And I will be when it ends as well. So if all you can do is survive it and then go back to being all these other wonderful things, then that's good enough.
I think we have a question next to you, and then we will move back there. Thank you for waiting.
Thank you again, both of you, for the talk. It was really good. So my name is Adanil. I'm a final year undergrad, and I'm actually thinking of applying for some drama schools when I graduate. However, because I haven't had any of the formal training, or some of my other friends have been to like Lambda and had professional training before. And so it's, what do you do in situations where you have to audition or play a specific role and you're not used to that? And also improv as well, just kind of trying to be someone that you're not in a way, and portraying that in a way that lets the people who are watching you also feel like, even though she doesn't have that training, she's still a good candidate.
Absolutely. So I sit on the panel for Guildhall, and definitely we would never care whether somebody had previous experience or not. I had very minimal experience apart from doing the King's Musical Theatre Society before I went to drama school, and there was somebody in my year who had never done a play before, and that's not like, you definitely don't need to worry about that. And I think the best thing you can do is find out, like with anything in life, what's the thing about it that you love. Find some pieces that helped you connect with that. What do you love doing as an actor? Find some pieces that connect with that, and put yourself into them wherever you can. In terms of improvisation, we are all improvising all the time. Like, that is, I'm not saying that as if it's some like amazing profound thing, but to get through a day, you're having to respond to stuff that you didn't know was going to happen. And acting improvisation is no different. Just having a kind of openness and a readiness to listen and to see what comes out of you in return, is the only tip I would ever give somebody. I wouldn't consider myself to be amazing at improvising as an actor by any means, but I always knew that as long as I listened, I'd have a chance for something good to happen next.
All the words a stage.
Exactly. All the world is a stage, guys.
And we have a question back there, Emily.
Yeah, in the middle. Thank you.
Very good.
Thank you.
Hi, thank you so much for the talk. I have not the loudest voice, and always when I have to speak louder, because I have to speak in an audience without a microphone, or the surrounding is loud. I always get asked why I sound so hysterical or angry when I'm louder. Maybe you have a tip.
Well, part of that is misogyny, that women are considered to be hysterical if their voices are raised. Sadly, we probably can't solve that in the next 5 minutes. I wish we could, but some of that is just an awareness that that's nothing you're doing wrong, that by raising your voice and it going into a certain tone, that is unfairly associated with an emotional state or a quality that people have a problem with. You are absolutely allowed to raise your voice and it to sound however it sounds. If you're finding that to be not helpful to you, however, then absolutely it's something you can do things about. So breathing, I am someone who naturally, in a loud environment where I'm trying to get my point across, my voice gets like a bit tight and a bit high up and starts sort of coming out from a place that sounds really stressed. The things I said before about grounding and breathing are the things that bring my voice back down into a place of relaxation. If people can't hear me when I'm doing that, sometimes I think, there's not much more I can do. I'm not going to scream and shout to be heard unless it's with my children, and then I will. But if it's a place where people will not hear me unless I push my voice to that place, I just think, well, maybe I will ask them to lean in a little bit. Maybe I'll say, sorry, I really can't speak any louder than that. I can also find a bit more power in my voice by getting both my feet on the floor and doing a little bit of connecting to my lower breath and my breath work. But just noticing that if it is starting to come from a stress place, if you can relax your body, relax your jaw, relax your neck, that will bring all of that down again. Yeah. So does that make sense? That there's a kind of two sides of it that I think you shouldn't have to change your voice. But if there are things you want to try, those are the things you could.
I hate to disappoint, but we probably have time for one last question. So no pressure, but who would like to ask the final question? Maybe here at the front.
Hi, I'm a PhD student and my research can be quite abstract and theoretical. So do you have any tips on how I can be engaged when I talk about my work?
Oh, wow. Yeah, I think, well, I don't know, this might, I'm sort of loath to give specific advice in case I'm really wrong, so take it with a pinch of salt, but when I've worked on plays that are abstract and theoretical, I've always had this image. I've worked with directors that talked about having this image of kind of drawing like the lines of a constellation as you speak. So you're guiding people gently through these like magical little points, knowing that eventually it will join up to something. I don't know if that image helps at all. So I guess it comes back to the intention of going, my intention for describing something abstract or theoretical might be, I'm going to guide them. You can also tell them this is abstract and theoretical. So come with me on that and check in a lot of times about whether they're following. But actually, sometimes when it's an abstract idea, you need to get through that whole constellation before you can really see if it's going in. Does that make sense? So I'd say like really take the time to like paint those little dots. And I think as well, I love abstract literature where there's lots of imagery and creativity in it, that you can use lots of beautiful metaphors or whatever it is that will kind of paint a visual picture. But not knowing what you're studying, I don't know whether that's actually helpful.
Yeah, I love it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm afraid that's all we have time for today. So apologies to everyone whose questions we didn't get to answer today. This event has been organized, as I have mentioned before, by King's Careers and Employability and King's Alumni Relations team. King's Alumni Relations team will be back with the final how-to session in May. It will be an online session, so look out for an email. If you are a student, I hope you have scanned the QR code to get your K points and look at the King's Edge platform for more events and activities. Thank you to all of you for attending and for your brilliant questions. And first of all, of course, thank you to Emily for answering all of these questions and for being with us today. Thank you so much, and please do come back.
Thank you so much.
We'll be back.